Hello, my name is Ray. Today I'm going to be talking about the metal magazine Circus and Hit Parader. There's many other music-related magazines out there like Faces, Metal Edge, and Rip, and one European one called Kerrang! Europeans called it the Real Metal Magazine because it featured bands like Slayer and Sepultura and Bon Jovi. There's a lot of music magazines out there, but today we're going to be focusing on Hit Parader and Circus. A quick look back, during the 1940s it featured songs like Glowworm, Takes Two to Tango, I Said My Pajamas, and Candy and Cake, which I'm sure most of you guys remember those hits. Once the 70s hit, they focused on pop rock hits from Kiss, Aerosmith, and Fleetwood Mac. During the early 80s, they focused on bands like Blondie, Journey, Pat Benatar. It wasn't until 1983-84 where they became metal magazines. It was a great source for metal news. MTV didn't really air a lot of news on metal bands, except for just on the Headbangers Ball. There was departments, features, which was usually the interviews, and the cover story, which was the band that was on the cover, the main story / article. Ads for new albums, by like Dio, Ozzy's Ultimate Sin, I Mean Somewhere in Time, and Judas Priest. And instrument ads, considering many of the readers were practicing musicians or inspiring musicians. And features, with titles like song titles and some were puns, like Kingdom Come, The Song Remains the Same, which was a Led Zeppelin reference, they were considered a Led Zeppelin rip-off, and Iron Maiden, 7 Times Lucky, considering that they just released Seventh Son. Letters to the editor was very much like the comment section on YouTube, but it only had about 6 per issue, 6 per month. Some were funny and some of them were angry, people just venting out and stuff. I do not have the letter in front of me, but I will try to recite it the best I can from memory, because I remember this one specifically. That's how much it stood out. One angry reader wrote in and said, Michael Schenker says that Eddie Van Halen's tapping isn't really guitar playing. I don't question Michael Schenker's skills, but Eddie Van Halen is a legend and one of the best guitarists out there in the world. F off Schenker. And he was signed Atomic Punk. Reader had great articles on the Scorpions, Ozzy, Rat, and Motley Crue. And did Hit Parader love Motley Crue? Hit Parader usually put out one band or sometimes one member on the cover. How did KK wind up on the cover by himself? Remains a mystery. The whole genres and terms and labels thing is also something that the magazines did and kind of started. I mean, power metal. They had some of these called power metal. They had the Kings of Poison, the Kings of Flash Metal. And that article, Metallica, Power Metal Masters. Circus Magazine. This one started it for me. Back in January of 1987, I bought my first issue of Circus Magazine. The February of 1987 Reader's Poll. And I bought it in January and it was February, so it confused me. I didn't know that magazines were a month ahead at that time. I was with my Uncle Mike helping out with janitorial jobs. So once we stopped at the Cumberland Farms, I bought this issue here. So once my uncle saw it, he goes off and states, saying those bands in that magazine worship Satan. I was like, what? He takes a cigarette out of his mouth. He said, those bands worship Satan. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, he was a Jehovah's Witness. These magazines didn't really specifically teach me about music or anything, but they informed me what was going on and featured the sections Music Gear, Drum Beat by Carmine Appice, and Guitar Clinic by Nick Bolcott from Grim Reaper, for those of you who don't know. Listings had tour dates, and of course they had song lyrics, but of course, yeah, Circus did copy Hit Parader with the whole lyrics thing. But also had a list of the best-selling albums and movies. And the top 10 national video cassettes were Van Halen Live Without a Net, Janet Jackson, Control, Bon Jovi, David Lee Roth, Dokken, Unchained the Night, Motley Crue, Uncensored, The Police, Whitney Houston, Pink Floyd, The Wall, and Striper live in Japan. Of course, Motley Crue and Van Halen were definitely my favorite ones. I even like that Bon Jovi one. There's some cool videos on there of them. Most of the Circus covers were like a collage of pictures and words. Some funny, weird ones were of Dolly Parton, Cheryl Ladd, and Miss Piggy. And seriously, I was going to joke around about the centerfolds of these three ladies. And a few days later, I noticed this. So they had Cheryl Ladd on the cover with Miss Piggy, and someone decided it would be better to have Miss Piggy as the centerfold? Are you friggin' serious? I guess somebody there thought Miss Piggy was sexier. Faces, I think, just disappeared. Metal Edge and Rip, I'm not really sure what happened to them. One of them was around, but Circus, Hit Parader, and yes, even Kerrang sold out and started featuring Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and just everything that was popular at the time. Nothing more than a popularity contest. They went back to their thing of like, hey, let's do what's popular, because considering during the 80s, once the music magazines became metal magazines, they weren't really going along with the crowd in the top 40, because you got to think most of the stuff was the pop rock stuff and the light rock stuff like Journey and Boston and all those other bands, Duran, all those other bands and everything. They could have focused on them, but they shifted their attention towards heavy metal. So that was good. So considering once they sold out in the early 90s and then started featuring all these other corny bands, that's where their sales declined. So I kind of laugh at that, because they wanted to keep their sales up and keep it going, and hey, let's cover what's current and what's new and everything. But that, in the end, that's what effed them over. Thanks for watching this video. See ya.